Hello, everybody, and welcome to people who have been here before to hear me speak. I was here in November 2017, and some of you, I think, maybe were here then, and 2016 also. What I would like to do, thank you, is speak a little bit about Brexit and the whole process from the British perspective. You may think it's like a Shakespearean tragedy, or comedy, or maybe both. Maybe it's a comedy and a tragedy. I don't know. In Britain, I should say I'm not a politician. I'm a consultant. I'm an engineer and a consultant. Most people now in Britain are fed up, frustrated with our politicians. We do not understand why they cannot agree with each other. But maybe it's obvious, because when the country voted to leave, it didn't vote on political lines. It voted on personal preference. And our members of Parliament also have their personal preferences. So both the main parties in the Parliament have disagreements inside each other about what is the right thing to do. And now people in Britain, politicians now in Britain, are either leave or remain. They are not right or left wing or socialists or capitalists. They are leave and remain. And this is now cutting across the political debate in Britain. I offer that as a small explanation of why it has taken Britain so long to work out what to do. And I don't know when we will leave. It's supposed to be Halloween, yeah, October 31st. So maybe that's a dangerous date to select. It was supposed to be the end of March. Maybe it will not be Halloween at all. I think I heard that the European Parliament, Käfer, I think is his name. Forgive me, my pronunciation is not very good. He says there is only a 30% chance that Britain will leave. I don't know how he knows this, but that's what he thinks. So, what I would like to do is use a few illustrations of research and newspaper headlines to try and explain a little bit about why Britain is where it is and what the opportunities are and have been for consultants in Britain. It's interesting that there are many polls in Britain taking place weekly, sometimes daily, to find out what the population want to say about Brexit. Here is one. You cannot see the lines, but I will explain. In hindsight, so looking back, do you think Britain was right to vote to leave? This is the question. These polls have been taking place since 2016, now 2019. And the top two lines are, we were right, we were wrong. And you can see they're very close together until about the beginning of this year, when they start to diverge. And people's opinion now, the green line, the top line, is that more people think, oh, maybe we were wrong. Maybe we shouldn't have voted to leave. Maybe that was a mistake. But if you look at the numbers, you can see they're still not very far apart. And the don't know line, the bottom line, is still about 15% of people. They don't know. So it's not convinced. People are not convinced. And this is the real problem with Britain and its relationship with Europe that we have had for many years. We don't know if we're part of Europe or not. Sometimes we like being part of Europe, sometimes we don't. And I can't explain why or when this is the case. Every individual has their own reasons. But later on, I have some interesting statistics from the EU, actually, about how different countries feel about Europe, and Austria as well. So, were we right or were we wrong? Maybe we were wrong. Or maybe a lot of the people in the country think we were wrong, but another lot think we were absolutely right and we should leave because we voted to leave, even if now it's wrong. You know, it's the problem with democracy. It's the best possible way of running a country, and it's the worst possible way of running a country. Now, one of the reasons why people are concerned, of course, is that the City of London, the biggest financial market in Europe and almost the world, but New York is now that, obviously will suffer. Funds will leave, and they have been leaving. We've lost about £1 trillion, so euros, pounds, nearly the same thing now, has gone from London since 2016 as fund management companies take their money out of London. So £1 trillion sounds like a lot. It's only about 1/15 or 1/20th of the total amount invested in London. So it's not so much really, but it's still a lot of money. And that's gone to other places like Paris, like Frankfurt, like New York. People have taken money out of London and taken it out of the EU, not necessarily into the EU. But it's interesting that the governor of the Bank of England is very forthright, very convinced that, of course, London will always be a big financial centre and we shouldn't be too worried about this. So we have publicity that says, look, it's a real problem. £1 trillion of assets have gone elsewhere, disappeared. Most of the jobs are still there, interestingly. And what that means is that the cost of raising finance for everybody will go up. Because some funds have been transferred to Europe, some jobs are in Europe, but mostly it's duplicated. So the cost will go up. There's no question about that. Our annual GDP growth, last quarter, fantastic. We're up to 1.8%, which years ago would be awful, but now it's pretty good. But mostly this is because of people importing stuff because they thought that on March the 29th we were going to be jumping off a cliff, and we had to get manufacturing, particularly, and pharmaceuticals, a big user of this, had to import lots of pharmaceuticals into the UK to make sure that our NHS and other organisations would have enough drugs to treat people. So it goes up, but our imports go up. And we wait to see next quarter what that will mean. I don't know. One thing we do know, of course, is that the government has been spending a lot of money on consultants. Hurrah, good for us. Interesting that the headline, so this is a Financial Times headline, this is not any old newspaper, says it delivers a bonanza for consultants. Actually, if you look behind the figures, it's not so big. What's happened, interestingly, is that the amount of money spent on consultants by the public sector in Britain has not changed so much. It's being spent on Brexit. So actually, is it really different? Interesting, again, if you look at the growth of the British consultancy market, maybe the figures aren't very visible from there, but in 2018 it grew by nearly 6% compared to the previous year. And that grew by 6% and so on and so forth. So the growth in consultancy as an activity in Britain, it keeps going. It keeps going at much more than the rate of GDP growth. And it has done since those figures start in 2011 as we came out of the financial crisis. And they've kept going up ever since. So for people in Britain, for consultants in Britain, being a consultant is still okay. If you're working on Brexit, there are many opportunities, but if you're working in other areas too, that's not a problem. What it's like in Austria, I don't know. I would be interested to hear. Maybe later we can talk about that. So Brexit and consulting, it's not such a big problem for us. What's quite interesting, though, is that these consultants, when you ask them, are their clients prepared for Brexit? Interesting that 77% say they're unprepared. This is the opinion of the consultants, not the opinion of the manufacturers, of the organizations, of the clients. And that's a bit of a problem. Maybe it's a good opportunity for consultants. But if they're not prepared now, well, it's too late anyway, isn't it, really? And if you ask them, I think, you ask the business people, again, maybe this is not so visible, but a lot of them say, well, we're about as prepared as our competitors, so that's all we need to be. So, no, I don't quite get that logic. That doesn't sound very good to me. But that's one of the issues, is that I don't want to spend too much on consultancy to get myself prepared for Brexit when I don't really know what Brexit is going to be anyway. And if I spend more, then actually it could all be wasted. So I don't want to risk the money. I'll just keep going. I'll wait and see. And the main choice of people when we ask them about the approach they have to Brexit is, we're just going to wait and see. We're not interested too much. I mean, the big firms, of course, are interested, but most firms are not that bothered. They'll wait and see. They trust themselves to be flexible, to be responsive, to problem solve when we know what the problem is. At the moment, consultants can present possible scenarios, and they're making good money out of doing this, but are the clients interested? Not really. And I don't know, again, whether that's the case with you. I'd be interested to hear. But in Britain, part of the problem of us being fed up with Brexit is that companies, clients, are also fed up with Brexit. They have all different possibilities of what could or could not happen. I think, well, let's wait and see. We don't know. We'll sort it out. Maybe it will be a disaster. But it will be a disaster for all of us, so it's okay. And that's kind of a bit of the British mindset, I'm afraid. I don't know if maybe you think that. We don't mind, actually. If we're all in it together, we'll swim through the mire and through the mud, and it will find a way out. It's a strange mindset, maybe you think. But actually, it's because one thing that Brexit has done, although it has divided the country, strangely, it has brought the country together against the outside world. Because it sees Brexit as, or Europe particularly, of course, and you remember me from last time explaining we have Britain and we have Europe. We don't have the same. We are not. Mentally, British people find it difficult to imagine themselves as part of Europe. And therefore, Europe is in some way the other people. And actually, what this has done, and particularly the very strict position that Europe has taken on the negotiating agreement, has actually drawn people together against what they're saying. And that probably wasn't the intention of the European group that came up with the agreement. But it has actually been that effect, that most of the press in Britain is saying that there is no flexibility at all. We go back to Europe to ask for some flexibility, and they say non, or nein, or whatever the word is, but no, you have no flexibility. This is the agreement. You signed it, or Theresa May signed it. So that's it. Don't come back and ask for anything else. It's too late now. You have to have this. So now the discussion is, what are we going to do about this document? Maybe we like it, maybe we don't like it. And the voices are now much stronger, saying, we don't like this, we should leave without an agreement. And we'll come back to that later. So we don't know the different kinds of Brexit. These are popular souvenirs in Britain at the moment. These little you want a hard Brexit, eggs, exit, Brexit, hard eggs or soft eggs. These are popular. And somebody bought these for me. So this is a photo taken in my house. What about Austria? It's interesting that I'm sure, that the Leibniz Institute, I think, in Germany did some research about the potential impact of Brexit on many countries in Europe. In Germany, of course, the impact could be very strong if a catastrophic Brexit takes place. 100,000 jobs and so on. Interesting, in Austria, somebody has calculated that maybe 6,000 jobs would be at risk, mainly through automotive in Styria, which is why the map shows that. Interesting in Britain, of course, if we have a hard Brexit with no agreement and we just leave, it will not be 6,000 jobs or 100,000 jobs. It will probably be 1 million jobs. It will be a disaster for Britain. There is no question about this. I think the politicians and the public figures who say we should just leave, do this to Europe, you know, off you go, we don't care, is probably the wrong thing to do. I say, I'm not a politician. I can declare I voted to stay. I like being part of Europe, but now I am fed up. If we're going to leave, we should leave. We don't want to go on forever talking about how we should leave. We should just do it. Even though I disagree with doing it, I find myself okay by the democratic process. Let's do it. Let's do it properly. Now, of course, we trade with you, with Austria, and you have a surplus to us. You probably know this already, I'm sure, and maybe we'll discuss this as well. The value of that trade is not so great, and of course most of it is in automotive, and most of that is integrated supply chains throughout Europe, in and out of all the different countries, and for Britain this is going to be a real problem. As you know, Honda, maybe you don't know, Honda in Britain have a factory, and they've said they're going to close it down. Mainly because they can't, well, they blame Brexit. In fact, there are many other factors at play as well, but Brexit is one of the reasons why they've made their decision to close this factory. Toyota are still in Britain and are happy to be there, and a lot of Toyota products come to Europe from Britain. So how will that work in the future? We don't know. If we're in a customs union, if we go by World Trade Organization rules, we don't know. And this is why, again, I go back to the point from earlier that people are fed up with trying to guess what the outcome will be. They are fed up with planning for 15 different possibilities. They just want to get on with something. Please make a decision, politicians, is what most business people are saying to the government. But we did discover, I don't know if you know this, that of course Austria has very strict rules about dual citizenship. I think it's not permitted, is that right? So there was a headline here that all the Austrian people in Britain, we're perfectly happy for you to have dual citizenship, but it's not the other way round. So you're not the only country that does this. So here is a headline that made some negative impact in Britain. Not so many people are, but it's quite interesting that what's fair and what's not fair is picked up by the press, even though this is a very small example, about how Europeans, and remember, British people don't differentiate between Austrians, Germans, Czechs, they're all foreigners, and they feel, I'm being a bit childish here, but this is how the press puts it, and how actually a lot of British people feel. They feel it's the foreigners trying to get at us. So the defences come up and the unity comes. And this is worth remembering, I think, that Britain has had this insular attitude for 1,000 years or more. And it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just a fact. And when dealing with this problem of Brexit, we have to bear in mind the British psyche. And we're not too convinced that the European Parliament and the European Commission have grasped this, to be frank. But we have to live with it. So we have a good possibility in Britain that when the deal is finally agreed in Parliament, and maybe you have been following this, I don't know, but it's been put to Parliament 3 times, and 3 times it has been rejected. And the Speaker of the Parliament, who is the order, indeed, that's the person, order, he says, yes, the Speaker of the Parliament, who is responsible for the process of Parliament, and whether the government or ministers like this or not, he is responsible. He has said you cannot bring it back another time for just another vote. It's like, what's the difference? You have to bring back something different. So next 2 weeks' time, when Donald Trump is visiting Britain, because he's coming for D-Day for the commemorations, Parliament will be busy debating about the Brexit withdrawal bill. So whether they will spend any time at all with him, I don't know. We shall see. Maybe it was deliberately chosen that way. What's quite interesting is that the British are very, what's the right word? They want to, there is a saying in English, I don't know how it works in German, but there is a saying that you can't have your cake and eat it. You know this phrase? I don't know how that works in German. You can't have it and eat it. You have one or the other. You can look at it or eat it, but you can't have both. So, British people, on the right here, we have some comments there that 64% of the public want British companies to have tariff-free access to Europe, but only 53% want European companies to have tariff-free access back to Britain. And it's the same sort of thing. 60% want unrestricted rights for British citizens to live in Europe, but only 50%, I think it was, 50% will permit the other way round. So the people who say this obviously cannot understand how this is duplicitous. This is wrong, you know, on so many levels. But the fact is, that's what the British people are saying. And I'm not very proud of being British when I read those statistics. It should be the same rule for everybody, in my opinion. But not everybody thinks this. So maybe, I don't know what it would be if you asked your people this question. Similar. It would be the same, you think? Well, maybe. Because it's quite interesting. If you look at the European research that was carried out by the European Commission prior, this is the can't remember Eurostat, it's the report that is produced before every set of European elections. So here we have, do you think that our country's membership of the EU is a good thing, a bad thing, or neither? So Britain is this one here at the end, and this one is Austria. Quite interesting. Britain has been put here because actually on all the graphs in the report, which you can read, because it's available on the EU website, the British one is slightly off to one side because we're kind of not in it anymore, but they've done it for us. So it's not in the right position in the graph. It's put to one side. So this is, what this says is that in Britain, 43% think it's a good thing, 22% think it's a bad thing, and 28% are not convinced one or other way. In Austria, it's 46, 15, and 38. So actually, we're about the same in that respect. And this was done in March, I think in February and March. You'll be aware of this. Now, for me, that's quite interesting because it says, actually, maybe we're not so far apart, the Austrians and the British here. We have some similar views and opinions about things. And historically, of course, maybe there are reasons for this. You know, if you go back 100 years and think of empires and the Austrian position and the British position, we have a similar history of a large empire being very influential, but much less so these days. And maybe there's something in the psyche of people that has a similar characteristic. I don't know. I'm not a sociologist. I can't say that for a fact. But it's quite interesting to look at the history there. If a referendum was held tomorrow regarding our membership of the EU, how would you vote? How would you vote? So the British, of course, are the biggest. We have 37% would vote to leave, 45% would vote to stay, and 18% don't know. Of course, those figures are different from the other polls. But in Austria, you are the second biggest of all of these. So 21% would vote to leave, 57% to stay, and 22% would not know. Now, I don't know if any of you people here contributed to these figures. Maybe not. But these were done by Kantar, I think, or a research organisation on behalf of the EU, and included 1,000 citizens from each of the EU countries that were carefully chosen demographically, etc., etc.
So Austrians complain about the state?
Maybe. And there's a lot of people like that. It's quite interesting that if you look at, you have Austria, France, that's next. 21% of the French would vote to leave. And Greek, and Cyprus, and Italy, and coming all the way down here to these countries here, Ireland, Netherlands, PT, Portugal, thank you, Luxembourg, who obviously they're at the heart of Europe and we'd be more interested to stay. So we ask, in Britain, people ask, if there was another referendum tomorrow, how would you vote? How would you vote? And what's interesting is that people would vote to, the top one is they would vote to stay, then they would vote to leave, so it's about 41, 36, 36, but 20-something% don't know. So, and this is the problem, that if we vote again, which some people are saying we should vote again, not just vote on the deal, but vote whether or not we should leave. We should have another referendum, which some countries are good at doing, aren't they? The Irish had one, and I think the Danes had one when the Maastricht time. Which maybe, hey, maybe that's when we should have had a referendum. Maybe when the Maastricht Treaty was signed, back in 1990-something, so whenever it was, sorry. But we didn't. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe the problem was that the political elite in Britain accepted that their decisions were the right ones for the people without asking the people. And when you do ask the people, eventually, they give you an answer you don't want, which is what's happened, of course, for us. So, the last question on the statistics was, if there was a referendum to say, because some people are calling in Britain for a referendum on the deal. So we should leave with the deal, or we should not leave, or we should, or what have you. So we should remain, or we should accept the deal. People now are saying, accept the deal. But still, there's a large proportion, 20%, who don't know. Even though we've had 3 years of talking, and 2 years, or 18 months or so, of knowing what the deal looks like, people are still not convinced. It's impossible to understand the British, I'm afraid. Even the British find it's impossible to understand the British. And maybe we should give up trying. I think that's what it is. But what I will say is it's easier to understand the British than it is to understand the rules of football. Now, I thought I'd make sure that, just to remind everybody, by the way, football is an important game in Britain. You've probably heard of some of these clubs. It's the first time ever, isn't it, that 4 clubs are from one country, so we're all very proud of that. But I did learn, of course, and the reason there's an Austrian club here, of course, that the results of the matches, the Europa Cup and the Champions League, affect Austrian football. Do you know this? Do you know the reason why? Some people maybe do. Are there supporters of Red Bull Salzburg here? I don't know. They are top of their league, I think. Apparently, if Chelsea win the Europa League, then Red Bull Salzburg goes straight through to the Champions League group stage without having to qualify. Did you know this? Some people did, some people are not. I can't understand this, but apparently it's because of different people. So if you think I think Brexit's complicated, I think European football is far more complicated. And I'm going to leave it at that, because I could talk for a long time on this, and that would mean that my colleagues get no chance to speak, and we won't have any questions. My first question was, is it a comedy or a tragedy? I think it's both. Eventually something will happen. And what I hope is it's not like Hamlet, for example, where, if you know your Shakespeare, everybody dies in a bloody mess. Or is it a comedy? I think we have to laugh. The British, we have to learn to laugh at ourselves. We're normally okay with that. Because this is serious stuff, but if we make it too serious, we'll never make progress. We just have to get something done. We have to make a decision, somehow or other, accept it, and move on. And at the moment, we are locked in Britain because the politicians can't agree. I suspect what will happen is that there will be another general election, I think, before October. Because I think Parliament will be blocked. Parliament will not be able to make a decision on what to do. It's a good example, if you've been watching the Speaker, order, he calls all the time. If you've been watching British politics, it's a great example of parliamentary democracy in action, with the worst possible results. It's not getting a result. There is no majority in the Parliament to make a decision one way or the other. And normally what happens at that stage is the Parliament is dissolved, we call an election and have another one. And I hope that the other one, the next one, will be better placed to make a decision, because this one doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So, thank you for listening to me. I hope this has helped. Maybe it has made it more confusing. I don't know. But I hope this has helped at least explain a little bit about the British approach to Brexit and how it's affecting consultancy in the UK. So I'm going to hand my microphone back. Thank you very much.